Welcome to a very special episode of This Catholic Life. Conversations about life's ups and downs, big and small, how we deal with every situation imaginable, whatever life throws at us, but still manage to be sensible, practical, and joyful. We're calling today's show Mic Drop. I'm your host, Peter Holmes, and today we have a conversation with our producer, Mike Lynch. Mike has been the producer of This Catholic Life for every single episode, and Mike has recently announced that he has accepted a job elsewhere, moving on to new challenges, new pastures, so to speak. And so this will be the last episode we record with Mike as the producer. And given that we have come quite a way in terms of podcast years, I think it's like dog years, isn't it? That
I think so, yeah.
When podcasts are very short-lived. I think you told me once that podcasts had an average of 7 episodes. Is that right?
Most podcasts that launch for the first time, 7 episodes, maybe 121 listens, downloads, and
right.
But they expire quite quickly because I think people get into it, as we discovered, and it is a lot of work. So
it is a lot of work, and to be honest, I mean, I've put in a lot of voluntary work because, just to be clear, dear listener, this is completely voluntary for me. I receive no kickbacks and no special deals with anybody for this. It's been a hobby project of mine, but Mike has gone above and beyond. Even though he's employed by the diocese to be the producer, he's gone above and beyond in almost every case in producing this podcast. And I'm very, very sad that he'll be moving on. Now, of course, I will personally be in touch with Mike because he's a good friend.
One of the great outcomes of this doing this podcast, the friendship between Mike and Pete.
I think so. It's been a really good thing, and it's always a joy, even if we hadn't become friends, to work with a professional. But it has been an additional joy to have called that professional a friend of mine. Now, I thought it was an opportunity, however, to go through some of the experiences of these last 2 years. It's more than 2 years. It's nearly. Is it nearly 2.5 years?
I think it's been 2.5 years. Yeah. We've done what? This will be 124 episodes, 91,000 downloads. So, we've gone through quite a journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't know what the future holds, but right now the future, at least of This Catholic Life, it doesn't include Mike Lynch. So I thought it was a great time to wrap up and talk through some of the things that we've learned and some of the experiences and what we've learned from, being here and around the traps with all these people. So if I can get the ball rolling, Mike,
sure.
Let's go back to that moment. I think we met in the cafe downstairs. First, we'd been pushed together by a mutual friend in Bishop Umbers who said, you guys need to talk because you've both got similar ideas. And it was a very exciting meeting because we threw around all these ideas. What do you remember from that meeting?
I think we were scribbling things down on a napkin.
Frantically writing, it was on a piece of paper you had for something else, I think, and you were frantically writing down notes. And as far as I'm aware, we came up with 8 different ideas for podcasts.
And it was really kind of, although audio shows or audio podcasts, if you want to call them, had been attempted before, but we were looking at really kind of branching out and using some of the new technology that had been developed and really taking advantage of that. And also the new ways that podcasting was being distributed. And so we were really going to jump on top of that.
Yeah.
And so we talked about how we take advantage of that, can we use social in a different way? And I think I recall me saying, can you start making a list, Peter, of all the topics and the guests that go with each one?
And we've had some very interesting guests as we go. I think in our first episode, Ryan Galliot and Renee Kohler-Ryan were the co-hosts, and it was a brilliant episode. And it's one of our most downloaded episodes, in fact.
New in Town. Episode number 1 is still the most downloaded episode, yeah.
It's possibly because, it's a great episode, but it's possibly because people who pick up on various episodes along the way then go, I'm going to listen to this right through. And they start at episode 1. And
what was really great about that episode is the chemistry. I mean, you were all friends prior to that, but the chemistry just gelled like that.
That's right.
And it was a lot of humor, and you could tell, you had that bounce. And those have been some of our kind of best shows, haven't they? With the Renee and Ryan and Cormac and Matt Tan, that kind of group. Those were always the ones where I think we had the most laughs.
Yeah, I think that having a good laugh with some friends, and a lot of them off recording too. There are some times I remember you several occasions thinking I should have left the recording on because we were having so much fun behind the scenes.
That's a funny thing about having done these podcasts is I can't tell you how many times we've said, I wish we had kept recording for the conversation that happened after the podcast was better than the actual podcast.
Well, that comes with people who aren't used to a microphone, because we had some really interesting guests. Almost all of them were very interesting, but over the years, and when we had those guests, they were often quite tentative on the microphone to start with, and they were very gentle and very careful. And then once we'd finished the conversation, they actually came out with some interesting stuff. And occasionally we jumped back on the mic and recorded it, but it was only after we'd learned our lesson the hard way that some of the more interesting stuff happened off mic. It would be great if we were to do this again. One thing I'd love to do is have a kind of a Patreon, subscriber system where people could subscribe into the podcast, and we could put like little snippets of behind the scenes up as a reward for people who are subscribing. They could hear those conversations and perhaps even see some video.
What I love even more now is some of the new technologies where you can record online allow you to have the audience come in, and they can even ask questions. They don't take part as a guest, but they can listen in while it's live, type in their questions. So that's quite fun. So maybe that's something we do in the future.
Well, and we always look forward to new opportunities in that respect. Now, let's run through some of the episodes. I really liked that first episode. It was a lot of fun because it was exciting. But very early on, we had Anna Hitchings in and talked about a good man is hard to find. And that was on the back of a fairly big Catholic Weekly article that she ran, and it went worldwide, that one. So
it did.
We got a lot of response. Can you remember who responded to that and what kinds of responses we had?
The question is, who didn't respond to that? Even people on the hallway were talking about that.
Right.
I found it, there were articles that came in, and there were people that stopped in the hallway. And I was really quite gobsmacked by it all, because the amount of conversation around the cooler, the water cooler that happened was really quite amazing. So what do you think, what was it about what Anna said, do you think was really kind of got people in a stir?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, I think love is the central desire of us all, and we all want to love someone and have someone dear. So as soon as you talk about a topic that's that central, you're going to get people interested. The fact that she took one particular view on that and was quite strong about that, blaming men mostly, which was, it meant that it
can
polarized things. Well, men are awful, and she's right to a certain extent that there is a serious problem with the quality of men around there. But an argument could be made the other way, that the problem is at least shared in some part by the opposite sex. But the fact that she was prepared to put a view out there, I'm very grateful for her, because it basically put the topic out, and we had some really, really decent conversations. And the responding articles, not just here but around the world, and the comment sections of all the places it was posted were intriguing to read, and I think it was a worthy discussion to have. And I'm glad we had the conversation. It was a really good one to get in that, and that's the kind of thing we were trying to do with the podcast: get talking.
Back to your original question, that's one of the things we discussed. And when we came up with the title, we really wanted to talk about all aspects of life.
Yeah.
And we really did.
Well, yeah. And I mean, think about the people we talked to. We'll come back to them in a second. But the things we talked about were everything from as trivial as movies and, Marvel superheroes. And we went...
Hey, they're important.
we talked about mortgages. We talked about life and death. We talked about euthanasia. We talked about pro-life. We talked about all kinds of things. Sex, Marriage and Laughter is one of our more popular episodes there with Spreaker and Damien Fisher, which I thought
that was a great ep.
I almost hurt myself laughing during that episode.
I was going to say there was less words spoken, more laughter through the entire thing. So it was a great episode to edit, by the way.
Indeed. And also we had some really good stuff on computer gaming. We talked to Americans several times about various things: Father Harrison, Rich Budd, Mark Shea, obviously Spreaker and Damien Fisher. We had the then Treasurer and now Premier, Dominic Perrottet, on and talked to him about politics. There's been some really, really prominent guests, but also some very good guests. I remember Sherry Waddell really struck a chord with all of us, but in particular, you had a reflection after she left Mike.
I think, Sherry Waddell probably was the most, I'm lost for the word. She just struck me. She was very sincere. She was very articulate. She spoke with such authority. I couldn't help but when she laughed, but thinking she had it right. When she was talking about evangelization, the first thing, her first step I remember is listen. And she said the rest of the steps don't matter if you don't listen.
Right.
And listen intently without talking. And then she made several jokes later how that was going to be a big problem because too many people were talking and not enough people listening. But she really had an impact on me. She was a really nice lady and very sincere about what she wanted to accomplish. And I think not to sound too cheesy here, but you could sense the vibration in what she was talking about, and
she meant it.
Yeah, absolutely.
She certainly meant what she was saying, but more importantly, she seemed to understand because she had been listening for a good 15 so years or 20 years in her job, going around helping Catholics become more alert to the issues in evangelization. She wasn't interested in programs; she was interested in people, and that shone through, I think. It's interesting. You mentioned a couple of episodes there that seemed to be, our podcast seemed to be made for. If I had to pick one, I would say Parenting Hard Mode was a really, really important one for me.
Yeah.
There's two episodes I would put back to back as an excellent example of what a podcast can do and what it's for. And Parenting Hard Mode touched on the deep pain and also joys and spiritual learnings and growth that's involved in hard pain. And
that was with Gab and Jovina.
Yeah. And Gabe and Jovina were very privileged to have them on, and it really went to places which I thought helped many people grow in themselves. And I had so much response to that one from a very personal perspective from various people. I can't mention them on there because a lot of it was confidential, but it touched so deeply. On the other hand, we had the Jungle of Toilet Paper Fiends, which took a very serious situation, which was the very start of the COVID mess.
I miss Renee's laughter.
And we mocked it so thoroughly and made fun of the silliness of human responses to such crises. And it was just a beautiful way, I think, of lightening up a very serious situation. Loved talking to the tradies, Jeremy Nunes and Trent Prasser. Loved talking to them about, just the lightness of the tradie thing. Again, a very serious topic, but they were just such excellent and funny men.
Yep.
As you mentioned, Cormac and Renee and Box, anything they did, but talking about mortgages, talking about almost anything with those guys. They were just going very cheekily going back and forth. I have to say, I very much appreciated Rich Budd being our American correspondent.
Yeah, from the Armchair Catholics.
Yeah, the Armchair Catholics actually inspired me to do this because I was listening to the Armchair Catholic podcast for about a year before I really stepped up to the plate here. And I loved what they were doing. They did something quite different to This Catholic Life, but I loved what they were doing and the fact that they had people misunderstand what they were trying to do when they stepped out and did it themselves. And it was really kind of, for me, a complete circle to have him, Rich Budd, involved and the other lads at one stage. More recently, Ben and Beth joining in the conversations has been very important because they brought
good chats,
a much younger and much cheekier chat to the podcast, which was a lot of fun. I love David Schutz, but then again, he's an old mate of mine from way back, and we've been shooting the breeze since I left seminary. Well, gee, that's a long time ago now. I have to mention Father Paul Rouse because his and Father Sam Lynch's episodes giving us really down-to-earth but very practical wisdom of young but still experienced enough priests in the diocese has been fantastic for the podcast. There's so many good people. I can't mention them all, but
Father Paul's accent also gave him a certain authority in the podcast.
There's a lot of people. I mean, Father Harrison Eyre was kind of fun. But in terms of episodes, I think each week it was exciting for me because I'm bad at small talk. If you catch me at a barbecue, I'm really rubbish at small talk. I don't do how's the weather. Well, I could fake it for a little while, but you can see me start to shake after a while. I can't do it anymore. I need to talk about something real, something substantial. I want to talk about life, the universe, and everything. I want to talk about faith and politics, all the things you're not supposed to do at an Aussie barbecue. And so this podcast has been a wonderful thing in the sense
you satisfied that need with the podcast.
Well, every week there was someone interesting to talk to. Every week we got to talk about real things. We got to talk about why it matters to Catholics, to everybody, and what difference it makes to be a Catholic and a Christian in this world. So it's been a real privilege and a really important thing, I think, for all of us to join in this conversation. I'd have to say, Mike, that as we look around in the world, there's been a lot of people shouting loudly from extreme left and extreme right positions, and we've tried very hard to present a reasonable, calm, middle road sort of approach to most issues. And that's been important, I think, not because we're saying it, but because it exists. And I don't think we're the only ones in this field. I'm very glad to say other podcasts have sprung up, and they seem to be doing a slightly different job, and they're doing well. I'm very proud.
And I think we worked out as a really good balance.
Yeah.
We were always bounced ideas off, and I would always say, like, let's not forget about this side or this point of the story, or let's make sure we cover that. Or we've really tried to be as balanced as possible.
Yeah, and we've looked several times at the possibility of having a more active debate, and the problems involved in that are how to portray each position fairly without seeming to insult the others, and how to work through those issues, and they're ongoing issues, and we've learned lessons. So what would you say are the lessons we've learned, Mike? Let's go there.
Oh, where to begin? I think, look, the one thing that I take away from all of this that has really struck me is, in the short time that we have, everything that we say and do matters. I think really that's the takeaway for me from the whole series. And I think we've met a lot of really good people who are doing their best in life and are trying to, do good things and create, God, it sounds cliche-ish, create happiness, not just for themselves, but for other people. And I really think that you really get that sense that that's what inspires people, is to that search for truth and for happiness and for love and
meaning,
for friendship, that meaning.
Yeah.
And so it's important what we say and do. And that's kind of the message. If you go through some of these things, it really as I listen back. So what people might not know is I record the session, and then I'll go back and listen to it, and then I'll edit it all up, and then I'll give it to Peter to listen, and we might make some changes. So there's a lot of going back and forth for every episode. But that's what really has resonated with me, is that all these people are just trying their best and trying to do their best and to do the best good.
And it's hard to underestimate, or overestimate rather, the effect of what you say. Now, people were worried about their own recording, and they, to some extent, there's a legitimacy to that. When I was on radio in Adelaide, we had a listenership which equated to the MCG. So we had a listenership that was, 80,000 people. And, if you were standing in front of 80,000 people talking, you want to make sure you've, practiced your lines a little bit. You want to make sure you've got it.
You don't want to stumble like I have through this podcast.
Well, who knows? Stumbling is part of a normal conversation, and so we try and be as real as possible. But the impact of the words that have come from this podcast, possibly only yourself and myself are aware of this, but we get a lot of feedback via Facebook, via emails, via private conversations, and most people don't want what they say to go on the podcast, so we can't tell you what they've said. But we very much appreciated everyone. I read everything. I read every email, and I read everything, and I tried to respond to you all.
And hasn't that been one of the most satisfying things about doing this, is the feedback? Been a lot of it has been really touching.
It has. And what I want to say to anyone who's been a guest or been involved in any of these programs is that you have no idea how many people you've touched. that has been a very important thing. Each episode has had some kind of impact on people, even if it's just to make them laugh, to help them feel like they're in a conversation of reasonable Catholics. That's been a very important part. But also, we wouldn't have kept going if you weren't listening. So even if you clicked on a podcast and that click just showed us, okay, someone's listening. And now we have 90,000 plus 91,000 downloads.
Yeah, amazing.
And we're on track to keep going on that if and when we continue on. But the important part is that this is serving people. Now, not everybody who listens is Catholic, and I'm delighted to say that. That means that we're actually able to be accessible to other people. But we primarily wanted to reach out to the Catholic community and say, you are a community, and there are many voices out there. There are many things that are worth listening to. There are many people worth listening to. I'm delighted to say I was out and about for a couple of the episodes. I went to New Zealand for one of them and was down in Victoria for another, and wandering around the place with a roving mic, and the feedback we got just on the idea of this was very, very positive indeed. But we can wax lyrical about that all this time. I'd like to talk about the experience of working with Mike. As I mentioned, I'd worked with radio before, but the producer was always off in another booth and I never got to know them. I did some production myself, but
we like to hide in the background because it's like breaking the fourth wall being on this podcast.
Well, even when I've done some interviews with the ABC, we were just across the road from Notre Dame. You're in a room and you're literally looking through a small window at the producer in another room, and they do a lot of talking to each other, and then they occasionally say, do it again. And that's all you get. But I've had a very close working relationship with Mike. I've enjoyed that very much. I don't think it's a typical producer-host relationship, because we have had conversations almost constantly about social media outreach, what's the impact, what guests we can do, what we can do with those guests.
We haven't had the yelling experience that usually happens between host and producer.
There you go. I think that's more on you, Mike, because isn't it the producer who usually yells at the host? I hope I've never yelled at you, but I don't make a habit of that. But I think we've had tense moments, but that's been about how do we get this done? It's been a good relationship, and I'm very proud to call you a friend and a professional colleague in this.
Same.
And I feel a little bit guilty calling myself a professional because you did all the really hard work. I was just talking. So
you steered the ship.
So thank you. And it's probably a good time not just to say thanks to Mike, but to say thanks to all those 90,000 clicks for downloads. Thanks to all of those listeners.
Absolutely.
Who gave us ideas, who gave us feedback, who constantly kept coming back and listening to us. And we listen to your feedback, even if you think you didn't give it to us, because Mike's very clever with this statistical stuff, and he could track where you are, which state you're in, how long you listened for, how many times you clicked in, all these kinds of things. And we responded to that. We paid attention. You'll notice that the podcast got shorter as we went along, where we realized that most people were listening for roughly half an hour. So we said, well, let's make it half an hour.
Yep.
And so I want to say thanks to all the listeners for guiding us along the way and telling us what's worth listening to. We've learned a lot from this. We have learned from you, and we've learned from your response to all the guests and your feedback. And especially I've benefited from your prayers. And I know many of you have been praying, and I wish we could thank you properly, but you're going to have to take this as my Christmas greeting to you, my thanks to you on behalf of Mike and I, that we're very, very delighted to have been in some way involved in your life. Hopefully, we'll continue to be. Hopefully, we'll see you in this or another way in the future. Please feel free to hit us up, or at least hit me up. I shouldn't dob Mike in for this. Hit me up on Facebook, or come and see me at Notre Dame, and maybe come and do some study there, but who knows. But in the meantime, thank you all. Mike, any kind of mic drop moments here? You got any wise words for us to finish off with?
I just want to echo what you said. I wanted to thank all the guests that were fantastic, amazing people that added to our life experience and added to the podcast. And to echo what you said, Peter, we're really thankful for everyone who listened, and I wish you all the best, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Excellent, Mike. Well, that's it for this week's podcast. If today's discussion got you thinking or arguing with your podcast device, let us know. If you have a favorite episode, feel free to post it up on our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, or just send us an email at thiscatholiclife.com.au. You can tell us what you liked and what you didn't like. You can continue the conversation through any of those means. Write us a review on iTunes. But remember, this is a uniquely Australian Catholic podcast, and we think that is an idea that was worth getting behind. Tell your friends. It's unclear what is going to happen with Mike not as the producer now, but for now, I'm going to use this opportunity to say Merry Christmas to you all, Happy New Year, and thank you for listening to This Catholic Life.